Greetings and welcome to the Haiku Pond, a place to ponder life through haiku. My name is Anthony, and I'm the caretaker of the pond. Each season, I share haiku written by myself and others. Each episode features haiku centered around a pre-chosen theme. You can learn more at anthonynanfito.com/haiku. If you're ready, let's prepare for our visit. Take a deep breath and dive in. The theme for this visit is endings and will feature haiku written by myself and others. Some of us shine bright, some of us burn out too soon. Make your flame worth it. The following 3 lines are from a journal entry dated October 31st, 2019. Life is precious. With the roll of a die, it can change dramatically. Be grateful for every moment. During the month of October of 2019, I was performing in an improv-style comedy show called Quest. It's the brilliant combination of improv comedy with Dungeons & Dragons themes, storylines, and rules. The performance even includes character sheets posted so the audience can track the character's stats. And we used a large 20-sided die for rolls. The rules in Quest are a simplified version of those used in actual D&D, since it's performed on a stage in front of a live audience, but it is just as fun. I was greatly honored to be able to participate alongside some very other talented actors for this performance. I played the role of Xerxes, a demigod who must fight evil with the help of his mortal compatriots, a leprechaun and a pirate. Prior to October 31st, we had run another show that ended on a cliffhanger, where Xerxes finds himself turned into a hot dog after battling zombie-like creatures deep in the sewers of a small town. For anyone who's played D&D or any other role-playing game, you know that the dice play a critical role in the gameplay. These rolls determine whether you make your mark when you fire your weapon, whether you successfully open a trap door and find a chest of treasure, or whether you live or die. In Quest, the same applies. In fact, the tagline of the show is, "Where the deaths are real." Of course, no one actually dies, but with each iteration of the show, a new set of characters and actors are brought to life for a new adventure. In this sense, the deaths are quite real from an audience perspective. Well, back in 2019 on Halloween, we had just begun the second part of the show, continuing with that cliffhanger where Xerxes was turned into a hot dog. There, I stood in costume. I had been wearing a robe similar to what Hercules wore in the Disney animated film, but over the top of that now was a giant hot dog costume to cover my 6-foot, 2-inch frame, brilliantly constructed by a friend and fellow actor of mine in the show. The Dungeon Master prepped the audience with a recap, and the characters were brought on stage and activated. In this storyline, we were exploring a creepy cemetery. Because what else would you explore on Halloween? And here's where it gets interesting. Not 5 minutes into gameplay did the cue for me to roll the die occur. It escapes my memory what triggered the die roll, but I, or rather my character Xerxes, wanted to explore something. Well, sadly for Xerxes, the roll of the die, which is the giant 20-sided die rolled by the audience, triggered a death roll. And that was that. Yep, within 5 minutes of gameplay, my character died. I wriggled out of the hot dog costume and left it on stage for dramatic effect. Off stage, I wandered into the audience, a bit dazed and confused, in my normal Xerxes Herculean apparel, and sat down. There, from the audience, I watched my comrades, the leprechaun and the pirate, grieve over the deflated hot dog carcass. It was a surreal moment for me. My character had died at the beginning of what was going to be at least an hour-long show. I wasn't quite sure if I should turn in early, since I had an early morning the next day, or stay and watch the show. I decided to stay, of course. As much as I love being in Quest, it's also great fun watching. But the surrealism of the moment didn't dissipate, and I realized that with the roll of a die, your life can change in a moment. I can't remember if it was this specific event or one prior to it, but I remember a friend of mine told me his partner had been diagnosed with cancer. When that die rolled below the threshold of life for Xerxes, and I then sat in the audience watching the show go on, thinking about the die roll and the sudden diagnosis of cancer for a friend's partner, it all hit me in that moment. Quest is more than a show or a game for joy, but it's also an apt metaphor for life. Life is filled with randomness and unexpected events, often beyond our control. As I learned on the Quest stage and from my friend's partner's diagnosis, life can change rather quickly. What matters most is what happens in the present moment. As I sat there watching the show go on, that's what I did. I soaked in the present moment. I watched my friends on stage continue their performance. I watched the audience roar with laughter as strange and bizarre things happened in the haunted cemetery of the Quest world. Since October 2019, I have often come back to that moment, to that die roll. I know I did not actually die, but it did put things in perspective for me. I have done my best to enjoy being in the present since then. But admittedly, as a human being, I am fallible, and I have forgotten this from time to time. But thankfully, I continue to remind myself of that moment, because in the end, I never know what the next die roll will bring. And that's the lesson I take from this haiku. And I hope you're able to take a similar lesson. Wherever you are, take a moment to be present. Name a few things you see, hear, or smell. Maybe write a haiku about it. If you do, I'd love to hear it. You can email it to thehaikupond@gmail.com. Lastly, I want to give a shout out to David Thorndell for commenting and reminding me about this haiku. I had an idea for this essay, but I couldn't find the right haiku to match. It seems David pointed me in the right direction. Thank you. Next, let's hear some of our submissions for this theme. From David Thorndale on Instagram @David Thorndale. A perfect birthday, the flavor of autumn wind in a slice of cake. From Zara Mugas on Twitter @ZaraScribbles and Instagram @Instalog by Zara. Waning moon, a lone kitten counts, the dead oak's rings. From Mona Bedi. Autumn, the way the leaves hide our footprints. From Lizbeth Ho on Facebook @ElizabethHolidaya. One lonely night, a fisherman in his journey lost in the deep blue. From Huana Hoy on Twitter and Instagram @Huana Hoy. No longer hearing a single breath or heartbeat, most hurting silence. From Haiku Nocturnal on Twitter @Haiku Nocturnal. I won't scatter your sorrow to the heartless sea. Plant your roots in me. From Robert Fail on Twitter at Robert Fail. I sat and waited until a quiet doctor told me you were gone. From Carissa Hoyman on Twitter at Carissa Hoyman. Time with grandchildren, seeing their happy faces, tears shed as they leave. From Christina Chin at haikuzyg.blogspot.com. Withdrawing from the body, divine consciousness. From Mark Heatree on Twitter at HeatreeMark and on Instagram at _cello poet. Autumn afternoon, not just leaves that fall, a funeral procession. From Linda M. Crate on Twitter as Thy Silver Doe and on IG at author Linda M. Crate. The leaves falling down, colors are becoming mute, flowers dead in frost. From Full Poetry on Instagram at Full Poetry. How come? She whispered. That's just how things are, he said. Tears welled in her eyes. From Melody Wong on Twitter and IG at Melody of Musings. That chapter I closed. To return to the abyss is to die again. Thanks for visiting the Haiku Pond. To read the featured haiku and connect with the featured poets, check out the show notes in the description of this episode. If you've been inspired by what you've heard, please share the show with a friend. For podcast updates, join the mailing list at haikupond.ck.page. For inquiries, send an email to thehaikupond@gmail.com. And don't forget to follow the podcast on Twitter at The Haiku Pond. Thanks for listening. See you next time.